Well, happy Tuesday, everybody. So thankful you're with me today for our devotion from 1 Samuel chapter 12. Want to remind you that this Sunday, which is Thanksgiving weekend, Thanksgiving is Thursday, then Sunday morning after Thanksgiving, we will have one worship service only, one combined worship service at 10 a.m., 10 o'clock, Sunday morning, no life groups, no child care. So let me repeat that. No child care, no life groups, one worship service at 10 a.m. this coming Sunday morning, Thanksgiving weekend. Today, as I mentioned, we are in 1 Samuel chapter 12. At the end of this devotion, I will share my personal devotional thought, but I want to point out a few things first from this chapter. Samuel, we've already seen, is an old man. He's not dead yet, but he's getting older and closer to it. More of his ministry is behind him than in front of him. In this chapter, he speaks to the people of Israel, and in the first part of the chapter, he has this conversation, and he says to them, have I defrauded you, stolen from you, done anything wrong? And they say, no, you've been a good man, a godly man, a great prophet. And then he reviews the history of their fathers, their ancestors, and basically says, going all the way back to the Exodus, the people have been stubborn and half-hearted in their devotion, just like King Saul, we've already seen, will be. They'll turn to other idols. They'll be so inconsistent in their walk with God. And at times, God will allow other nations to harass them, to invade them, at times even conquer them. You read that back in the book of Judges, the book of Judges, before 1 Samuel, and they would get in trouble from another nation because they were sinning, disobeying God, worshiping idols, and they'd cry out, and God would raise up a judge or a prophet and deliver them, and that pattern was repeated over and over. It's going to be repeated over and over with their kings. And then he says, but now you've asked for a king. This is how God's always, when you needed him, God has always shown up with a judge or a prophet, but now you've demanded a king, and God gave you what you wanted. But remember, God had told Samuel, and we saw this yesterday, give them what they want, but warn them. And so here Samuel is warning them once again. Look at verses 14 and 15. And I want you to notice the word if, I-F, in these verses. If you will fear the Lord and serve him and listen to his voice and not rebel against the command of the Lord, then both you and also the king who reigns over you will follow the Lord your God. How do you follow God? How do you follow God individually? How do we follow God as a people, as a church? Fear the Lord, serve the Lord, listen to the Lord, don't rebel against his commands. I say follow the Lord. Verse 15, here's the condition again, if you will not do those things, if you will not listen to the voice of the Lord, but rebel against the command of the Lord, then if you don't listen to God and obey God, then the hand of the Lord will be against you as it was against your fathers. All those times in the book of Judges, and even before that in Deuteronomy and so on, Numbers, when they sinned and worshiped idols and rebelled against God, God let another nation invade them, conquer them, harass them, steal their crops, their livestock. And God says, listen, here's the warning with you and this king. If you don't listen to me and the king doesn't listen to me and you all don't obey what I'm saying, then my hand of blessing will be removed. And actually, my hand will be against you because I'll allow these other nations to do to you and your future children and grandchildren what I let happen to your forefathers. God's promise of blessing and protection for Israel is and always has been conditional. It's never been guaranteed. It's always been conditional. Now, he goes on down here in verse 17, and so Samuel prays, and God sends this thunderstorm, rain and thunder, and It's during the harvest season. They get scared, and God is showing them his power, but he's also showing them his displeasure with their rejection of him as their king, and they're wanting an earthly king. And God goes on to say, hey, because of my name's sake, I will defend you in this first battle with your new king. I'm not happy with you, but I'll defend. It's not a promise to always fight for Israel and give them victory. It's a promise that in this upcoming battle, God will fight for them and they'll be okay. But there's a final warning. Verse 21. Samuel the prophet says to the people, he said, you must not turn aside, for then you would go after futile things which cannot profit or deliver, because they are futile. Now, really important lesson there. We are to be laser focused on following Jesus, laser focused on what his word teaches. But when we turn aside from that, he says we begin chasing other things, futile things that have no power to deliver you because they're futile. How do you minimize temptation in your life? How do you minimize going after the wrong things? By keeping a laser focus on following Jesus, engaging his word so you can follow him and become more like him. Laser focus on Jesus. Laser focus on reading his word. Keep your heart focused that way, because when you don't, you're going to focus somewhere. Your life is going to drift in some direction. And if you're not laser focused on Jesus, your life is going to drift in a different direction. And that's what he's warning the people about here. Dropping down to verse 24, he says, only fear the Lord, revere God, serve him in truth with all your heart, for consider what great things he has done for you. All the blessings of God should cause you to have no doubt about serving him. Verse 25, but here's the warning. If you still do wickedly, both you and your king will be swept away. Are you seeing the pattern of what God promised the nation of Israel? There's lessons that is so important for leaders, but also for people in a church, in a family, in a nation, in a ministry, to fully follow the Lord. And let me add, if you go back over the last 5, 6, 7 decades, what if our churches in America have been more concerned about evangelism than traditions? What if over the last several decades, our mainline denominations that a century ago had a great history and reputation, if those mainline denominations had not forsaken the truth of God's word? What if over the last many decades, we had discipled generations of children instead of entertaining them with busy, fun activities at church? What if we'd focused on making disciples instead of just baptized church members? Would we have more godly people in this country, and would that therefore have made a difference in where our country is today? I absolutely believe it would have made a difference. There are many reasons America is in a mess today. Many reasons, not one, many. But one of the reasons is because our churches, many of our churches, for decades, many of them abandoned the truth of God's word. We thought you were a disciple if you were busy in activities at the church rather than engaging God's word and becoming more like Jesus. We made church members. We didn't always make disciples. And if we had just done our job, so many things in America would be different today. That's my prophetic word for today. Now, a personal devotion is, man, it's powerful what God says in verse 23. Samuel is talking to the people, okay, and they've rejected his advice. They haven't listened to him. They haven't listened to God. But he says in verse 23, moreover, as for me, here's the prophet now, far be it from me that I should sin against the Lord by ceasing to pray for you. But I will instruct you in the good and right way. What a powerful word for all of us, for preachers, for me, Sunday school teachers, for parents, for spouses, community leaders. It's easy to become embittered, frustrated in life, in relationships, in ministry. When people make bad decisions, they don't listen, they don't follow, etc. So easy to become embittered. And if we let that happen, you know what? Things don't get better, they just get worse. Bitterness never makes anything better, just makes things worse. So easy to give, so easy to give up on people. Parents to give up on rebellious kids. Pastors to give up on cantankerous church members. On and on I could go. Coaches give up on an embittered fan base. Samuel could have allowed that to happen. He could have become embittered. He could have given up. But he said, if I do that, I'm sinning against God. So I'm going to continue praying for you guys. And I'm going to continue instructing you in the good things, the right things, whether you listen to me or not. Now, I think some people today in the religious culture instruct people in the right things, but they do it with bitterness. They're angry. And it just shows in their voice, their demeanor. Even teaching the truth to your kids or to a church or to the community from a place of bitterness, guess what? You're sinning. It doesn't work. We have to work hard to keep our hearts from bitterness. I think this one verse is a different way of saying what Jesus said when he talked about loving and forgiving. See, prayer is both powerful and practical. Powerful in that it changes people, situations, but it's also practical. It's really hard to stay embittered towards someone for whom you pray. Now listen, here's the caveat. For whom you pray for God to bless, for God to help. Not praying for God to take vengeance on them, for God to prove to them they were wrong and you were right. When you pray out of bitterness, you just become more bitter. But when you pray for God to do a work in your life and in that person's life, then you're able to have effective leadership, effective ministry, and effective marriage. Bitterness destroys always. Genuine praying for the well-being of others heals a whole lot of things. I love that verse and what Samuel said. I think we all could benefit from taking that to heart. Hey, God bless you. I'll be with you tomorrow as we look at several verses in Deuteronomy chapter 28. Yes, we're jumping around. It will make sense. Deuteronomy 28 tomorrow. God bless you, everybody.